But now let's go to our political panel, Steve Chobo and Kelvin Thomson. Thanks very much for your time this morning. Let's start with the world economy and the G20. Australia's hardly a powerhouse at the G20, Steve Chobo, but it does have a very enviable story to tell on the economy, doesn't it?
Well, we do have an enviable story to tell, and that's largely a consequence of the terrific state of the nation's finances that the coalition left to the current government. We've also done our level best as an opposition to keep fiscal discipline on this government, which frankly is a tough ask given that this government has taken our debt from being $70 billion in assets to now $130 billion in debt. But look, having said all of that, what's clear, and if there's one consistent message from around the world, it's this. Fiscal discipline, the importance of making sure your budget is under control and you don't have massive budget deficits, is the single message from around the Eurozone about keeping a nation's finances sustainable.
Kelvin Thomson, what's your response to that, and what do you attribute Australia's strong position to?
Well, it's clear, David, that Australia is in a very strong economic position. While other countries in the G20 in Europe and the US have been doing it tough, Australia has managed to achieve in May official interest rates, inflation and unemployment all below 5% for the first time in 40 years. Now, that is a really important and significant achievement, and it means that we can go to forums like this with our head held high.
But why do people feel that they're struggling so much then in Australia?
Certainly people are experiencing cost of living pressures. There's no doubt in my mind from talking to constituents that those pressures are important. But I think that Australians need to keep sight of the fact that we are in much better shape than people in other countries in Europe and in the US, and we're there because of the government's sound economic management. Had we pursued the sort of policies that Steve and the opposition urge on us, in fact we'd see another 200,000 Australians out of work compared with where
that is a simply false assertion.
Which where we are now.
I'll give you a chance to respond. Let's hear the response.
I mean, it's just a completely false assertion. It shouldn't be said. I mean, you know, I like the way that Kelvin will sit here and prognosticate as if it's a statement of fact. I mean, the reality is that your government has wasted billions of dollars, and I think from our perspective, David, the issue is this. There was possibly an opportunity to have reined back spending that this government made on wasted programs that didn't deliver an economic benefit for the people of Australia, and that's what we sought to cut.
Did they not keep Australia out of recession?
Of course not. No. I mean, the reality is that what's kept Australia out of recession is China. It's the fact that China has been devouring our resources at an almost unprecedented level, the so-called mining boom Mark II. That's what's kept Australia strong. Make no mistake, it's not this government, it's not their failed policies, and it certainly will not be the world's biggest carbon tax, which comes in a matter of only weeks.
Kelvin Thomson, on Greece, do you think that the outcome will deliver some stability for the region, for the world, for Australia in particular?
Look, I think it's a bit early, David, for people to be making that kind of prediction. In the first place, the political makeup hasn't been determined despite the fact that the election's been held. And secondly, we've seen the issues facing Greece and facing other countries in the Eurozone rolling on for a long time now. And I think it'd be a brave person who predicted that all the problems are going to disappear tomorrow or even the day after tomorrow. I think this still has a fair way to run.
And what about the Prime Minister's letter to the other G20 leaders, Kelvin Thomson? Is that an approach, is it a danger that perhaps she could be seen as lecturing other economies that are much bigger than Australia?
Well, I think the Prime Minister and everyone who goes there has got an obligation to say what they think, and that's what she's doing. And I think, as I said before, that Australia is able to do this from a position of some strength and authority, given the fact that we have been able to manage our economy in a sound way and deliver economic outcomes in terms of inflation, in terms of interest rates, in terms of employment, which are the envy of other countries around the world.
OK, let's move to some more domestic politics. In the Australian newspaper this morning, the government considering changing the Fair Work laws for greenfields projects. A fixed period for negotiation is something that's being mooted so that those negotiations don't drag on and cost employers too much. Steve Chobo, is that a good move? Is that the sort of thing you'd support?
Well, it's certainly a step in the right direction. I mean, the fact is that under Fair Work we've seen a level of power handed on a silver platter to the trade union movement that really has held Australia to ransom. I mean, let's be clear about what's going on in these greenfield sites, David. You've got a new project, say it's a resource project. The company goes in and has to negotiate with the unions. Now, it's common knowledge that the unions know the longer they can make those negotiations drag on, the more bargaining power that they've got over that particular project. And they're not accountable back to employees because there are no employees at this stage. So this just underscores how much damage Fair Work Australia and Labor's Act has done to, not Fair Work Australia, but the Fair Work Act has done to industrial relations and handing all that power to the union movement. So any reforms there are positive.
Kelvin Thomson, do the unions have too much power now?
No, David, and it's amazing that Steve, on the one hand, says that these projects aren't happening, and yet you see people claiming that these projects are being subject to unreasonable delays. We read this morning that these project costs are unsustainable. And yet we are going to see $120 billion worth of mining and energy projects in the forthcoming year, $450 billion worth of projects in the investment pipeline. Just a couple of weeks ago we had the mining companies saying that we cannot train our own young people and Indigenous Australians fast enough to work on these projects, so we have to bring in foreign workers. And now they say the projects are being held up unreasonably by unions. It's not true.
So you don't think the Fair Work laws need to be changed then?
I think that
in that respect,
I think that the laws that we have in place are not preventing record levels of investment, and that really what mining companies are seeking to do is to put downward pressure on wages and conditions and to prevent workers from sharing in the benefits of the mining boom.
Okay, well, we're standing by to take you to Mexico for the Prime Minister's speech to the B20, the business element of the G20. We will take you there live when she steps onto stage. You can see her there sitting on stage, about to speak. Anyway, no, she's not quite ready to go. But let's move on. New South Wales MP Richard Torbay has joined the Nationals and will fight Tony Windsor at the next election. Now, there are claims from New South Wales Labor that he tried to negotiate with Labor in New South Wales to become Premier. But John Della Bosca this morning in the papers has said that doesn't gel with his version of events. Kelvin Thomson, either way, it looks like Labor, particularly in New South Wales, is rallying around Tony Windsor. Is that appropriate?
I think that the people in Tony Windsor's electorate will make up their own minds about that particular electorate when the time comes. Richard Torbay and anybody else is entitled to stand and put themselves forward. I think that the fact that the Nationals are looking out beyond their own ranks doesn't particularly surprise me. There's in the House of Representatives there's not a lot going on there in the National Party, so I'm not surprised that they look outside their own ranks, but ultimately it's a matter for the electorate.
Steve Chaba?
Well, I mean, it's just consistent with past Labor form. You saw Sam Dastyari come out and say that there are all these allegations and, they were trying to do a deal, and now the actual man involved in the heart of it, John Della Bosca, comes out and says what Sam said doesn't gel with his recollection of events. So, unfortunately we just continue to see a pattern of behaviour there from the New South Wales Labor Party, which basically sees a massive gulf between the actual truth and what they claim is the truth.
On another matter, Labor is convinced that the sexual harassment claims levelled against Peter Slipper in the courts at the moment are politically motivated. We've seen the Attorney-General, Nicola Roxon, call a press conference on Friday night about this. Kelvin Thomson, why is it okay to talk about this matter before the courts but not the other matters that the government has argued it's sub judice?
Well, the government has expressly filed material before the court about this, alleging that it is an abusive process and that James Ashby has worked with others to damage Peter Slipper and support his political enemies. And it is appropriate for the government to explain that it has done that. The fact is that after the Ashby claim was first filed, you saw Tony Abbott holding press conferences and appearing on the 7:30 report and commenting on it time after time. What is being done here is simply advising the public as to the action the government has taken.
Okay, I'll have to cut you off there. We're going to go to Julia Gillard now in Mexico, addressing the B20.
Economic and social